All right, everybody. Welcome back to another Purpose Served podcast episode. I have an extremely special guest right here. He has wrote many books, many novels. He's a creator. He's an inspirational dude. He's a coach. He's a counselor. Mark David Gerson. Introduce yourself, man.
Well, I'm just glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And as you say, I'm an author, fiction and nonfiction. I'm a screenwriter, coach, creativity catalyst. I like to call myself. And just my passion is inspiring people to connect with theirs.
And how did you come about like discovering that passion of yours, man?
Totally unintentionally, which may may itself be an inspiration. I never wanted to be a writer. In fact, that's probably the last thing I wanted to be. Growing up, I was was a big reader, certainly, and I owe that one to my mother. But writing, creativity, anything like that terrified the hell out of me. And in school, I hated English class. I hated having to write essays and compositions. When I had electives, I gravitated toward maths and sciences. And it wasn't until, well, I like to joke that my muse, we've talked before about what a muse is. My muse tricked me into becoming a writer. Because clearly that was the intention all along, but I was the last one to know. So, as I mentioned, the reason that I gravitated away from creativity, first of all, I didn't think I was creative, and creativity scared me, as I realized after the fact, because there was no single right or wrong answer. And what always terrified me in English class was the interpretation. And I was always afraid I was going to get it wrong.
Wow. That's actually very profound that you actually say that, because even if you even think about that and how strongly driven it is to your purpose, a lot of people don't understand when you're going down this avenue, it's never like a straight line or right and wrong. You kind of got to like weirdly enough feel your way through this whole entire thing. So was that like one of the early things for you that led you ultimately into it?
Well, I mentioned that I was kind of tricked, if you will. When I was in high school, a friend of mine was putting on a musical, the first musical that this school had ever done. And he asked me if I would do publicity for it. And I can't even imagine now who I was then who said yes. Clearly, I was channeling the answer, because the me I remember would never have said yes. But I said yes, and suddenly I had to learn how to write something basic, like a press release.
Wow, is that like one of the many like I would want to say basic things that you can start to learn how to write through, like writing like something like a press release?
Well, the nice thing about a press release for me back then was that it was very formulaic. There was a right way and a wrong way to write a press release, and that was very reassuring for who I was then. The following year, I was asked not only to do publicity, but to head publicity. So again, it's expanding bit by bit, right? Well, I discovered I could do this very well. And I mean, not only the writing part, but the promotion part. And when I got to college, first of all, when I was in college, I changed my major many times. I was in the sciences. In fact, I ended up with a business degree because it just seemed like a sensible thing for someone who didn't know what he wanted to do. But while I was in college, I continued to do promotion and publicity for both college theater and actually local theater. And one of the things I thought I would do at the time was to go to theater administration, because it would combine my love with theater with my love with my business. Well, that never really happened. And what ended up happening was I got my first job in public relations. But I have to turn the clock back a bit, because back in the days before computers, what we used to write our essays in high school were typewriters.
Yikes.
And the very first typewriter I was given, was a very unusual brand. It was a Swiss brand called a Hermes. Now, if you know your Greek mythology and your Roman mythology, Hermes is the equivalent of Mercury in Roman mythology, and Hermes was the god of, guess what? Communication.
So he was like the messenger.
The messenger, basically the god of writers, right?
Yeah.
So long before I wanted to be long before I thought I might ever want to be a creator of any sort, I was given this typewriter with the name of the god of communication on it.
So this is all just telltale signs that...
Absolutely. There was nothing conscious going on. It was all just kind of happening to me. So again, my first job was in PR. It was for a small PR company, brand new company in Montreal, which is where I grew up. And I had to write. My second job was also in public relations, but suddenly I was not only writing press releases, I was writing newspaper articles. And so again, there was nothing conscious about saying, well, what do I have to do to become a writer?
Yeah.
It was like, I was, without even being conscious of what was going on, I had made myself available in a sense.
No, I understand. You was just like when we like talked about the Muse and everything, you were literally showing up and just doing the job of whatever it was without, like, you know what I mean? No kind of like preconceived notions.
And I had no spiritual awareness back then either. I was just doing what showed up, basically. And so again, we fast forward a bit, and while I was working at that job, I was working in public relations for a university, I began to freelance on the side. Suddenly I was writing for magazines and newspapers on the side, in addition to my job. And I was doing so well that I quit my job to do it full time. And suddenly I was a full-time writer.
Just like that.
Just like that. It wasn't, again, there were problems at work, so I was happy to leave. And I had this opportunity. So again, I took it.
So at that certain point, did it turn into like something that you knew, like, this is me, this is something that I truly love to do, or were you still not conscious of it yet?
Still not really conscious. I mean, I enjoyed what I was doing, but I wasn't doing anything. I mean, what I teach now, what I write now, is to write from a place of the heart, write what you're passionate about, do what you're passionate about, and then I was just looking for gigs. You know, I had to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And I got gigs, and I freelanced full time for over a decade. First in Montreal, then I moved to Toronto, and then something shifted. So I was freelancing as an editor. By the way, I'm self-taught in everything. I have no formal training in anything I've ever made any money at.
I can definitely tell by the way you're speaking that, like, for you, it just seems like experience is the best teacher, and I personally believe that.
Yeah, I mean, while I was working at the university, I did take a non-credit course in news and feature writing just to get something, but really no formal training in anything. So one day I'm working as a freelance editor at a magazine in Toronto. It's a Monday morning. I walk in. I was working on site. Yeah. And one of the staff editors runs up to me and she says, I took this creative writing workshop this weekend. You have got to take it. And I went like this and backed away slowly because I was concerned. The last thing on earth I wanted to do was take a creative writing workshop. In my mind, again, no spiritual awareness at the time. In my mind, you go to a creative writing workshop or class, and you sit down and you write, and you get up and read what you wrote. Everyone gets their machine guns out and mows you down.
Wow.
No judgment issues at all, right?
Oh my God. No, that doesn't sound like.
I said to this woman, and she was, the funny thing about her is that she was very soft-spoken. She was never pushy until that moment. And she kept badgering me all day about that writing workshop. And finally, I gave in, I surrendered, and signed up for the next one.
You didn't have much of a choice, man.
No, in any of this, So I signed up. Finally, I signed up for the next workshop, whenever it was, and it began the transformation that turned into what you see today. That was the turning point. That workshop basically taught, or I won't even say taught writing, opened us up to our creativity in many of the ways that I now teach. The instructor invited us to continue. It was a one-day workshop at the University of Toronto, and the instructor invited us to continue with her on a private basis, just the same group, over time. And I did that, and I continued working with her, and ultimately she became both my writing mentor, and my spiritual mentor, and my teaching mentor, because it's because of her that I began teaching. A few years later, after I took a meditation course with her, and that really was, if the writing course was the gateway to my creativity, the meditation course was a gateway to my spirituality. And suddenly it all came together in a way that it never had before. And one day, that's when I began to work with Carol one-on-one. She was my mentor. And one day she said to me, "How would you like to teach a section of my course?" And I said, basically, no way in hell.
Why, at the time, did that seem like extremely terrifying to you to be teaching the class?
Absolutely. Well, you see, here's the thing. One of the things that all my teaching and writing is about letting go control. And the idea of being spontaneous in front of a group of strangers terrified me. So she asked me once, and I said no. She asked me again some months later, and I said no. And then she asked me a third time, and I thought, well, let me think about it. And then I had a dream. And I was doing a lot of dream work at the time. In fact, I was seeing a Jungian therapist to do really deep dream work at the time.
Whoa.
And I had a dream, without going into all the details. At the end of the dream, one of the characters in the dream says to her husband, "I have to teach." And I woke up, and I knew that, as terrified as I was, I had to say yes. And that was another huge turning point. And I taught that first class. Funny story about that. So, mentioned my control issues, right? And so, I worked with Carol to prepare me to teach the class. I took additional additional classes of that course just to be more familiar with it. And then I had to prepare for my first night. It was a 10-week course. And I'm sitting at my little laptop, in effect, scripting everything I was going to say. Because, of course.
God, I already see where this is going.
And my hands seized up. I had such cramps in my fingers, I couldn't type.
Oh, so you were just going crazy.
And I got it. I got that I didn't need to do it. And I had to let go and trust that everything and this is key, everything I would need on that first night, I already knew.
Yeah.
And really, that's the basis. Again, I'm not teaching anything. I'm reminding you of what you already know.
So I was reading like a book called like How to Speak Like Effectively. And in that book, they were just talking about, like, if you were like well prepared in a subject and you were go out to speak on a subject, the worst thing you could possibly do is read verbatim, like what's on like the paper, because it's like, it's already in you. You already know it. So it's just like that sense of control that you was just talking about. It's just about letting that go because it's already in you. You already know how to present it. So that's a really like a valid point.
And now if I give a talk, I love to give talks now, and I don't want to have a text. So it's like, it's the complete reverse. Anyhow, I began teaching. I began teaching my own workshops, developed my own material.
Mm-hmm.
and I was teaching a workshop in my home, still in Toronto at the time, and led the people in the group through an exercise, which I developed. And for the first time ever, little voice said, "Okay, now you do the exercise too." Normally, when I teach still, I don't write while people are writing. I want to be available, so I'm present for them. I'm not in my own space. But I'd worked with this group before, and so I did the exercise. And what came out of me that evening, I guess, way back in March of 1994, a long time ago, was the beginnings of a story, a fantasy story.
Oh, is this the start of the Moon Quest?
It is the start of the Moon Quest.
Oh, wow.
And it was a story I had no conscious desire to write. Remember, the conscious desire is really the key here, because what's going on beneath the surface is what's real, and the conscious stuff is filtered by our fear, right? So I wrote this really wacky scene because it's fantasy, so to my mind it was making no sense at all, but I wrote it. And the next morning, something possessed me to keep going at it. And that became the Moon Quest. As I wrote the story, I knew nothing about it except what was happening from one day, from one sentence, from one word some days to the next. And it was it was an act of total surrender, total lack of control, to let the story, which knew itself, even if I didn't know it, come out. And that's kind of the journey, and it's just gone on from there.
That's like, it's kind of weird with such as like the story of like the Moon Quest and like the whole trilogy and everything, how if you really look at it, people in general just all have a journey, you know what I mean? And just add symbolism like on top of that, it creates a greater like level of understanding for that individual as well. And is that like some of the reason why, like, for example, you write stories like that, is just to have people thinking about this kind of stuff in a different way?
Well, you asked the question in a way that suggests that I'm in charge of the process.
Oh, that is true. that actually, so, and now, all right, now I get it.
and I'm not, with the Moon Quest, there was a story that was inside me that needed to come out. And I didn't consciously know what it was. All I could do was get out of the way and let it happen. And just that has been the story of my life as well. It's people say, well, ask for what you want. And I say, well, what I think I want and what's inside me are not the same thing.
Wow.
What's inside me is huge. What I think I want is tiny. And so it's about being available, being open, allowing. I have a memoir that's called Acts of Surrender, because in my life, it's been about surrendering to a higher purpose, however you want to define that. So, yes, I mean, the Moon Quest and the books that follow, and the books in that series that follow. It's no longer a trilogy, by the way. I'm writing a fourth book, so it's now a series. It's no longer a trilogy.
Oh, seriously? Oh, new insight here. Oh, wow. Yeah. Dang.
So, which was a big surprise, because I thought that with the third book it was over, but again, it's what we think and what's real aren't always the same. But the Moon Quest ended up being totally unconsciously a metaphor for my own creative blocks and my own creative opening. Now, wow. I couldn't see that while I was writing it, which is just as well, because I would have really screwed it up. All I could do is allow the story its freedom. And one of the things that I say in several of my books for writers is that the story is smarter than I am. And frankly, it's not only the story I'm writing, it's a story I'm living. And, my description of how I became a writer proves that. I Absolutely. Did not want to be a writer. I did not believe I had an ounce of creativity in me.
And like, for people that's like, I guess, listening right now or watching this podcast episode, I really do believe personally that everybody do have like creative like ideas in their head and are creative in general, because I believe personally that's like we're made to create.
We
Like,
are
and
absolutely all creative. That doesn't mean we're all writers or we're all musicians, but we're all creative. Some people are creative in the kitchen. Some people are creative in the work, in the wood shop.
yeah,
Some people are creative in the garden, but we're all creative. And we can all let that out in whatever way it shows up. And, my experience proved that to me, because the block wasn't that I wasn't creative. The block was that I was terrified. I was
that's
terrified of being judged.
it's crazy how, like, and I talk about this a lot on this podcast, on how much fear actually holds us back from who we truly are, you know.
Absolutely.
And what's even more scarier than, thinking that this might go wrong is just like what you've been saying literally this whole time, is just surrendering to an experience. People genuinely just don't like being vulnerable. And
Of
in order
course.
to do what you've done, you have to be extremely vulnerable.
One of the things that I hope I'm modeling and teaching is vulnerability, because the only way to be authentic is to be vulnerable. There's a line, I think it's in the Moon Quest, where I'm pretty sure it's in the Moon Quest, where the character who is being sent out on this quest very reluctantly, we're all reluctant, he does not want to do this. He does not feel he is capable of doing it. And he's afraid, and he asks his grandmother, who was the elder bard, the chief bard. He asks his grandmother. He says, "What if I fail?" Because of course it's like the fate of the free world rests on his shoulders, right? The whole land depends on his success.
Yeah.
And her answer is, "What if you don't?" And it really is as simple as that. What if you don't? And the only way to find out is if you try. Now, nobody likes to fail. I don't like to fail. And of course, everyone says, well, you learn through your failures, and it's true. But who wants to do it? We all want to succeed. But the only path to success is by taking a chance, and by risking failure, as Toshar, the character in the Moon Quest, must do. And it's not a particularly pretty journey, Like none of our journeys are particularly pretty. We all go through lots of shit.
Yeah, seriously.
And but he rises to the challenge, in spite of himself, which often happens for us as well, and it certainly happened for me, and discovers his strength, and discovers his courage, and discovers his gift as a storyteller.
So ultimately, it's like a hero's journey.
Absolutely. But here's there are books for screenwriters, because I write about screenwriting as well. There are books for screenwriters that map out the hero's journey and say, this is what you have to do for your story to fit into that.
Yeah.
And that really pisses me off.
and what sort of way is it because it's like it puts you in sort of like a box?
It puts you into a formula. So what I say is the hero's journey lives inside you. It lives inside everybody. You don't have to map it out.
Yeah.
You don't have to structure something. You simply have to allow the story to unfold in its natural, authentic way.
Oh,
and your hero's journey will be there.
So for everybody, like, could you tell people what a hero's journey actually is for those of like people who don't know what a hero's journey is?
Well, a hero's journey is basically the journey of our lives. It's we're on a quest, like on the Moon Quest, whether it's a conscious quest or not, for fulfillment, for authenticity, for the experiences of a lifetime, and we go through crap along the way. We all do, I mean, the world is going through crap right now. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So in fact, it's kind of a global hero's journey going on right now. And the hero's journey is what we encounter and how we overcome it to come out the other side. So the hero's journey is the human journey. So you don't have to to squeeze your story to some kind of a formula, because the formula is in our unconscious mind. And if we allow the story, this is why I say the story is smarter than we are. If we allow the story its freedom, then the story expresses what's in what's in the collective unconscious.
You just made me think about something actually kind of freaking weird and mind blowing. It's crazy. Like it just idea that just popped up in my head just had me start telling me like just the experience is just taking you outside of your own perspective, and your own perspective is extremely limited compared to what the actual experience has to offer.
And that's true of the stories we're living, it's true of the stories we're writing.
That's so crazy.
So the Moon Quest, go back to the Moon Quest. It's my favorite example because it has so many examples in it. So again, I didn't know the story, right?
Uh-huh.
I didn't even have a title. I just had this weird scene at the beginning, with this crazy looking guy and this crazy looking horse-drawn coach. I didn't know what was going on. But let's move to about a third of the way through the story. I have a title suddenly, okay? And I have a vague sense of where the story is going now. So I think now I'm in control, right? Ha.
So, oh God.
So every once in a while, I'm busy typing, I'm writing. Well, actually, I wrote that longhand, but that's another story. The story would, so I had this idea where the story is going, right? So it's going here. And the story as I'm writing it would kind of veer off, way off to the right. And I'd say, come back. And the call was to trust the direction the story was going in, not the direction I thought the story needed to go. And by trusting the direction the story was going, and again, this has parallels in our own lives, not just writing, but in trusting in the direction the story needed to go, the story became bigger than I could have imagined.
Absolutely.
Took on dimensions that my conscious mind could never have figured out. When I was writing the Star Quest, which is the second book in the series, I had an idea of how it was going to end at a certain point. But not specifically, but fantasy has good guys and bad guys, and you figure the bad guys are going to come to a bad end, right? That's what happens. Yeah. Good guys win, bad guys lose. The end. So it's the last day. I'm of the first draft, and as I'm typing, the story goes off. The ending goes off in a direction I could never, ever, ever have consciously come up with. And it's nothing at all like the stereotype ending of a fantasy story or an adventure story. And my jaw's on the floor. I'm so stunned because it's perfect. It's the perfect way to end this story that I could never have come up with it. Just try to plan it or think it out or intellectualize it.
So during this process, is your spiritual awareness is increasing as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, all the time.
Yeah.
I have a particular technique for writing that I teach and I have used for most of my books, which is basically, it's almost a meditative technique for writing, which is writing without editing, writing without stopping. And that's used a lot in personal growth exercises, but it's not used often in writing projects. But that's how I wrote the Moon Quest. I would sit down, every morning. Again, I was writing longhand, so pen, pile of paper, and I would just keep writing, and I would not let myself stop. Because the moment I stopped, that's the moment my fear got in the way. That's the moment my mind got in the way. That's the moment that I got in the way of the story's wisdom. I just forced myself, and it was hard because again, it's letting go control. If I forced myself to keep writing, regardless of what was showing up on the page, the story always proved itself to be right. Always.
Wow. How long would you be sitting at a time? I would assume it's for hours.
It varied. With the Moon Quest, I can't remember. It's a long time ago. And every book is different. Sometimes I sit for an hour, sometimes I sit for a couple of hours. I don't and there are writers who write all day. I don't do that for the most part. I don't have a fixed routine, which probably makes sense in the context of everything that I've said.
Yeah.
Every book has been different. Every draft has been different. I used to always write first thing in the morning. And now I have a dog who requires to go out first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So by the time I get up and walk the dog and come back, I need to eat. So suddenly it's not first thing in the morning anymore. So now I write in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But that could change too, So it's my take on discipline and routines is like many of my takes on many things is very different. I don't resubscribe to the butt in the chair at 9 a.m, and stay there for 3 hours, and then get up and be. I don't operate that way. I believe that if we do what we're passionate about, the passion becomes our discipline.
And that's extremely powerful, because it takes you out the space where you're feeling like you're obligated to do these tasks. It's more so like we just keep saying this whole entire time, is like you're just showing up because you want to show up, and then after that you letting the whatever it is take over.
Think about the word discipline. So you're in school and you're disciplined. It's a punishment, right?
It was never a good thing.
It's not discipline. When you think about discipline, it's not fun. It's punishing. It's harsh. And so I try to turn discipline around and say, okay, instead of being disciplined by your work, how about you look at the word a different way and look at the word disciple? You're a disciple to your work.
Yeah. So sometimes you got to play mind tricks on yourself like that, man.
Well, yeah. Well, because it's what you're doing is you're getting yourself out of your mind, because it's your mind that's holding you back. Now, we need the mind, obviously. Can't get the words on the page without the mind.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was living in Nova Scotia, where I wrote most of the first draft and all the second draft of the Moon Quest. I remember picking up newspaper and reading just for fun, reading the horoscope. And I think the horoscope said something like, lose your mind, follow your heart, or something like that. And that really is my philosophy. It is lose your mind, get out of your head, and get over here, because that's where the story is. That's where the passion is. And again, whether it's the story you're writing or the story you're living, it's the same thing.
I got a question for you. What makes you think that, like, how can I put this? Like, why are people so afraid to tap into that and try to find what they're passionate about? I believe that people already know. They're just simply scared to go in that direction.
Because it upsets the status quo. So we live comfortable lives. We slot into our jobs or into our routines, and the moment we ignite the passion, we ignite change. And suddenly the status and it's change we can't predict. So early on in my conscious spiritual awakening, my conscious spiritual journey, I was still living in Toronto at the time, and I remember waking up one morning in terror, because it felt like my life was changing so radically that not only would nobody I know be able to recognize me, but I wouldn't be able to recognize me. And that's what people are afraid of. And the good news and bad news is it's true. My life did change in ways that not only could others not recognize me, but I couldn't recognize myself. But the good news is it was a good thing. But in the moment when we're at the edge of the cliff, being asked to step off into the void, it's terrifying. We all want the illusion of control.
Yeah.
Whether it's in our writing because we're outlining, or in our lives because we have the, again, illusion of security of a job, say, or whatever. And what this work invites you to do is step off the cliff.
Oh, seriously. And it's very, very, very terrifying. For example, to do what you're doing. It's extremely terrifying.
It is. It still is for me some days.
No way. Seriously?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not this paragon of fearlessness. I've got courage. But courage isn't the lack of fear. Courage is saying, okay, I'm scared. I'm going to act anyway. I'm going to go into the burning building and pull the kid out. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's not like one day the fear is gone. Well, one day a fear is gone, but then you move up to a higher fear. So again, many years ago, I was living in Hawaii. My daughter was not yet 2. And she would always hold my hand in her mother's hand when we were out walking, because the world is a scary place when you're a 2-year-old, right? No, the world is a scary place when you're not a 2-year-old. When you're a 2-year-old, it's a scary place. So, at a certain point, she didn't need to hold our hands anymore. That meant she wasn't afraid of whatever that was. But there's
something different.
But now there's something different, because you move up the ladder in the sense of what you're fearless about. So she can now cross the street by herself. She's 21, I hope so. But I'm sure there are other things in her life that are scary. So every book I write is different. Every story is different. Every button it pushes in me is different. And so, no, it's not like I sit down every day, all calm, cool, and collected and say, well, what does the day have for me today? Of course not. I think it's important for people to know that, because I don't want to be put up on some pedestal of fearlessness. I want you to know that I get scared too, and that's part of being vulnerable in the world. It's letting people see your humanity. Yeah, because that's what gives them permission to do the same.
The one thing that I always say as time goes on, which it seems like we're lacking, is understanding and empathy. And
Absolutely.
If we was to increase that, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we have. Like, people can do like a lot of different things, but at the same time, when it boils down to it, we're all essentially are the same. We think the same, we feel the same. We just do things differently, but that doesn't mean that we're different.
So one of the big ahas I had recently was that in order to have empathy, you have to have imagination. I cannot have empathy for you if I can't imagine your situation.
Yeah.
And so without imagination, there can be no empathy. And that's why creativity is so important. It's all about imagination.
So when you go about teaching people how to be creative, what's like, I guess, the fundamental thing that you try to get people to understand?
Jump off the cliff.
Go all in. Just go all in.
Again, but I have techniques. Again, the technique I described to you, I call writing on the Muse stream. It's a stream of words, and it's designed to get you past the fear, past the blocks, past all the reasons, past the comfort zones, past all the reasons why you would normally stop, and into the realm of imagination. In fact, beyond the realm of conscious imagination, into the realm of unconscious imagination. Because even our conscious imagination is limited by what we've experienced or read or seen or heard. Our unconscious imagination is infinite.
But that's like that part right there. I would want to say, like, I'll say me personally, I would say, like, for people, that's like the scariest part, because it's the realm where things are created. It's chaos, and you're turning order from that chaos.
And no control whatsoever. And that's what terrifies all of us. I mean, the reason why writing that first draft of the Moon Quest was so terrifying for me was exactly that. I had no control over the story. I had no idea what was going to happen from one moment to the next. All I could do was, I talk about this in my workshops too. You don't push your pen across the page. You let the pen pull your hand across the page as you're writing. All I could do is let my pen pull my hand across the page and trust that it knew what it was doing, because I sure as hell didn't.
That's extremely powerful, man, because in a sense, if you think about it, it's like, I guess, like you're forcing something to happen, which is supposed to be coming natural. So something is bound to, go sour.
It's like jumping off a new cliff every day. So I think I shared this story in my memoir. I can't remember now, but again, going back to Toronto, the early years of my spiritual journey, conscious spiritual journey. Around the same time, I had that terror that the world was going to, I was going to change so dramatically. I had a nightmare, and I was in the nightmare. I was clinging to the roof ledge of a high rise, and I kept hearing in my head, "Let go." Now, no one in their right mind would let go, and in the dream, I wouldn't. But I woke up in a cold sweat, and I was upset, and it was horrible.
Wow.
So I technique I don't do often now, we did a lot back then when I was doing a lot of dream work, was I would take the dream image into meditation with me and try and shift it in meditation. So I went into meditation, and I imagined myself back on that, in that scene, and I tried to let go. And that first day, I still couldn't do it. And the second day, I still couldn't do it. And the third day, I could feel the pain in my fingers. It was so intense because, you look down, you see all the cars, and you think, splat, right? And finally, what I sensed was that the pain of holding on was so great that I really had no choice but to let go, and whatever was going to happen was going to happen.
Wow.
So in the meditation, I let go, fully expecting to plummet again, in my imagination, plummet to the earth and go splat, right? And that's not what happened at all. If you can imagine me as a feather kind of just floating down, that's the sense I had in the meditation, and finally being caught.
Wow.
And I don't remember lots of dreams from back then. That experience is still so incredibly powerful for me, because in those moments when it's hard for me to let go, and of course it still happens, I remember that every time I have let go, every time I've surrendered, every time I've said, if you want to use a religious analogy, thy will, not mine, but thy will is not some white-bearded guy in the sky. Thy will is my higher will. I'm always fine. Does that mean I'm not scared? Of course not. But it means that if I can trust that I'll be okay, I can act. I can step off the cliff. I can let go of the building. So these days, of course, if I imagine that, I get caught closer and closer to the pavement because I have to trust more. So then I got caught pretty high up. Now it's like, this close on the pavement, right? But I'm still caught. I don't go splat. So again, it's letting go is hard. Letting go is saying, I'm not in control. But you know what? You're not in control. You're not in control anyhow. You just think you are.
You just think you are. That's like, and when I did my podcast for the Muse, like, for me, I knew what a Muse was, but like I talked to you about, I didn't know what like the information like that was out there. I couldn't believe how limited it actually was about a Muse out there. And then that's when I came across your video, and I was like, whoa, this is actually perfect. This is perfect. It gave me that clarity that I needed. But around that time, what I started realizing for myself, that with even me starting this podcast about, I want to say 2 months ago, it was really, really scary. I did not know what I was doing at all. You know what I mean? I didn't know really how I was going to go about it, but something just kept telling me, like, just do it, just show up, just do this, do that. And I didn't really know. I didn't know what I was doing. And then from the conversation that we had, I'm just like, whoa, there's something strong at works that, that I'm not conscious of, but sort of conscious of.
So it's not that you didn't know what to do, it's that you didn't know you knew what to do.
Wow, that's actually different.
Right?
That's crazy.
Because we carry this knowledge, this wisdom, this knowing is within us. We just have to find ways of tapping into it. And sometimes just doing it is the way to tap into it. When I went, I did not know how to write a novel when I began the Moon Quest. I'd never written a novel before. But the story knew how to write a novel. Right? So some years later, I decided to adapt the Moon Quest. This is before it was published, into a screenplay. And I thought, well, I can't do that. I have no idea how to write a screenplay. The screenplay is more complicated than, in a sense, than a novel, because there's all kinds of technical constraints. And I suddenly realized, well, you didn't know how to write a novel, and the story showed you.
Yeah.
Can you trust the story to show you how to write it in this new form?
You've been on a road.
There were some technical craft things I had to research, but in terms of the story itself, it showed me how to write it. And basically, I was taking, if you will, the energy, the essence of that idea, that story, and just giving it a new form. One form was a novel. This form now was a screenplay.
Wow. So it was just like, it's the same thing, but just in a different perspective.
Right. So it's to pardon the pun, but it's looking at the story through a different lens. Right. Because anytime you're telling a story, you're taking something that's really energy, an idea, and of course, energy is infinite, and cramming it into words on a page. You're taking the infinite and making it finite. So what I was doing with the screenplay was the same thing. It was just taking that infinite energy and giving it a different form. Same story, same concept, same energy, but channeling it, if you will, into a different form.
That's crazy. I don't know, like a lot of things that you're saying right now, I'm not even going to lie, it's blowing my mind. You know what I mean? Because the way that, you know what I mean, you can put things, it's crazy.
So I actually, I don't know if anything's going to happen with this. I actually took the same story and adapted it as a stage musical, just for fun. I've only written a couple of drafts of it. It's sitting in a drawer somewhere. But again, it was the same idea. It was saying, okay, so this story is not the book. The story is this. The book is an expression of this. So what's the difference then of giving it yet a different expression, and looking at it through a different lens, through a different perspective. So it was kind of fun that way.
Imagination is just, it's weird and it's powerful. It's crazy how you can have something like, I guess, in your head, so to speak, you know what I mean? And then like bring it into the real world and manifest it into your reality. It's that transition to me is like incredible. Like, for example, like the whole Moon Quest, the Sun Quest, the Star Quest and everything, like this is all in your head at one point. And now
it's actually bigger than my head, right?
That is true.
It's bigger than my head.
You just embodied it.
That's too big for my head. So that's why it has to find a way onto the page, because I can't contain it.
Wow. You just have another idea just hit me out of nowhere. You know what I mean? But it's just like you were, I guess, like the vessel for it to come in and come through and come out.
So basically what I tell coaching clients is, you didn't choose the story to write. The story said, who can write my story? I'm going to look around. Okay, you write my story. So
wow.
So the story is saying, it's my story. I've chosen you to tell it.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying. It's not your story. This is my story, but you need to tell it. You are the best person for the job.
That's right. Even if you don't think you are. Sometimes, especially if you don't think you are.
That's incredible, man. Like for me, like with this whole podcast and even Purpose Served, what I'm doing, a lot of this stuff started from me playing basketball. And in high school and in college, I didn't play basketball. Like I did, but not from the teams and the schools that I went for. And then out of nowhere, you know, I would want to say starting about 3 years ago, you know, I got a chance to play in Spain. I played in Puerto Rico and all different places across the country. You know what I mean? And now I'm playing in the ABA in Delaware. It's kind of like weird. And then I look back at the transition and I didn't believe that, honestly, I was capable of doing any of this stuff. But something kept pulling me back, even though everybody was just like, I don't think this is for you. And at a point, I'm just like, yeah, it might not be, you know, but I just kept showing up and just showing up. And then weirdly enough, like I say that basketball has connected me with, I guess, my even deeper purpose is just trying to help people discover their own purpose, which is crazy. It's weird. I didn't plan any of this.
Right. Well, you said out of nowhere, and it really isn't out of nowhere at all. It's out of somewhere. It's just out of a somewhere that is too big for our minds to be able to define.
When you think about stuff like that, do you go down like a rabbit hole when you think about the vastness of that idea?
I try not to think about it too much.
I understand why.
I try to just live it as opposed to try to analyze. I mean, there are times that I do try to analyze it, but it transcends analysis. So what do you do?
Yeah, like that's actually, I guess, a great way to look at it, because like for me, I guess I've been understanding like my spirituality even better, and I guess my consciousness even better, and it's been really having me questioning, like, I guess this thing that we're living in. I don't know what to necessarily call it, the makeup of energy and like everything, and the vibrations and the frequencies of everything. I'm just like, what in the world? I'm extremely curious about it. So curious, but oftentimes just like, whoa, I maybe not want to, be too curious about this kind of stuff.
Well, I think it's about a lot. Again, it's like when I was writing the Moon Quest. Okay, it goes back to that. The story was bigger than anything I could possibly imagine. So I just had to be it. I just had to live it. I just had to be it moment to moment. And I think that's the key. Just as best as and perfectly best as we can, just stay in the moment with it. What is the moment calling on you, calling from you, right?
So is it in regards to that, can it take you off the, like, I guess the moment, if you necessarily got a strong source of you thinking about the future or the past while you're doing whatever it is that you're doing?
There's nothing wrong with thinking about the future and the past, unless it pulls you out of what is required in the moment.
Yeah.
We all think. I mean, we all plan ahead. We all remember, reminisce, think back. But are we doing it to escape the moment, or are we doing it to support the moment?
Wow. Whoa. I think that people just focus too much on everything outside of like this moment right now, and that's why they have a lot of like shortcomings.
That's because it's too scary to be in the moment.
It is. This is where all the possibilities are, man.
That's right. But that's also where all the change is. That's where the leaping off the cliff is. That's where all the letting go of control is. So we escape into the past. We escape into the future. We escape into the shopping mall. We escape into drugs. We escape ourselves.
So if you do that long enough, how bad can those effects be to like your mental and everything?
Well, look at the world.
Yeah. That's like, this is all, now to think about it. Yeah. This is just, everything right now seems like it's in such disarray and so chaotic. And partly that's became one of my main reasons for even doing this podcast, because I feel as though we need a crazy paradigm shift in this weird energy that we got going on right now.
But we're living the paradigm shift because chaos, creation always comes out of chaos, right? So this is the chaos. What do we choose? What do we choose to create from it, or what are we allowed to emerge from it? Is really a better question.
That's very, very profound. So we've come to the end of the Purpose Served podcast episode today. Can you please tell the people how they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. So the best way, kind of the grand central station for me, is my website, which is markdavidgerson.com. You can also, and Mark David Gerson, all one word, is my username on many social media. You can find me on Facebook that way, on Twitter, on Instagram. But yeah, go to my website, send me a friend request on Facebook, or follow my author page on Facebook or on Instagram or Twitter. Reach out to me, ask me a question. You can also contact me through my website.
And I'm letting you guys know this right now.
That's where you found me.
Yeah, that's exactly how I found him. He will get in contact with you. And for everybody that's watching and listening, I will put everything in the description for you guys as well to make it that much easier to get in contact with them. And please, everybody, serve your purpose, Mark David is definitely doing his. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.